Greetings, friends. This is the Krasmodo channel.
The topic of motorcycles from socialist countries is quite interesting, so in this episode I want to talk about the history of Yugoslavian motorcycles and mopeds by Tomos. We'll also mention the cars of this brand along the way, figure out how it all started, and see what happened to the company nowadays. Make yourself comfortable in front of your device's screen. Let's get started. First, let's remember what the now defunct country of Yugoslavia was like. After World War II, Yugoslavia became a federation of 6 socialist republics under the names Democratic Federal Yugoslavia from 1945, Federal People's Republic of Yugoslavia from 1946, and Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia from 1963. While fighting against the Nazis, the head of the communist movement, Josip Broz Tito, managed to find common ground both with the West and, at first, with the Soviet Union. Tito's ambitions included plans to create a Balkan Federation, which was supposed to include Albania and Bulgaria as well.
Alongside the political maneuvering, the government of Yugoslavia and Josip Broz Tito sought to develop new branches of industry.
These included both automobile and motorcycle manufacturing. In July 1954, in Segana, now part of Slovenia, a company for the production of two-wheeled vehicles was founded, and soon a licensing agreement was signed with the Austrian company Steyr Daimler Puch. Puch had extensive experience in building motorcycles since 1903. The Yugoslavs believed that the economical and durable Puch motorcycles would be well suited for the gravel roads and steep slopes typical of the Balkan region. Also, the Austrian company offered the license on very favorable terms, since it was going through a crisis.
Literally the following month, that is, in July-August of 1954, the name Tomos appeared for the first time in the company's documents.
This name stands for Goods on Motor Wheels Sežana.
In October 1954, the government of Yugoslavia began the construction of the Tomos factory in Koper, in the coastal industrial center of Slovenia.
Production in temporary facilities began in 1955, and the factory was officially opened in 1959 by Josip Broz Tito himself, the president of Yugoslavia. The first product of the Tomos company was a motorcycle called Tomos Puch SG250. In 1955, 137 of these motorcycles were produced. 124 RL, 125 scooters, and 100 Colibri mopeds were assembled. The following year, mopeds made up the lion's share of production, namely 1,712 units.
They were followed by 615 motorcycles, and then scooters.
At the same time as the licensed production, Tomos began developing its own production models. At the end of the 1950s, under the general name Colibri, numerous versions of the Puch MS50 moped were produced. The first Colibri models were marked VS50, and later the model names varied with numbers from 01 to 15. Some versions of the mopeds were adapted for foreign markets.
In 1959, the Tomos company produced more than 17,000 Colibri mopeds and signed a contract for the first major export of its products to Sweden.
Among the most successful models was the Colibri D12 version, first introduced in 1961. It became the most popular moped in Slovenia. In the early 1960s, market research showed that interest in heavy motorcycles was declining throughout Europe, and Tomos, like many other motorcycle manufacturers, followed the trends of the era. The range of products was adapted, and the factory in Koper focused exclusively on producing mopeds with a 50 cubic centimeter engine. To ensure systematic and organized development, the Institute of Technical and Economic Research was established in 1962. The 1960s were the most productive period for Tomos, and the Netherlands became an important market in the early 1960s,
So much so that in 1966, a Tomos moped factory was built in the town of EPE.
The factory in Holland lasted until 2009 and turned out to be the longest-running moped factory in that country. The history of the Dutch branch came to an end because by 2009 it was more practical to produce mopeds in Slovenia, where labor was much cheaper.
No rider becomes an expert overnight. First, you learn from experienced riders.
Need help?
Investing can work the same way. Meet eToro, a multi-assets investment platform where you can follow top investors, view their portfolios, and even copy their trades automatically. Join real-time market conversations with ideas, trends, and questions as events unfold. And all of that connects to a wide range of assets, including stocks, crypto, ETFs, and more, all in one platform. eToro is a regulated service with over 40 million users across more than 75 countries. Start investing with eToro and get $50 worth of stock when you deposit $200 or more. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code and get your $50 worth of stock now. Join the largest social investments platform and learn from the pros. Now, back to the video.
However, let's go back to Yugoslavia. In addition to producing motorcycles and mopeds, the company Tomos began manufacturing cars for the domestic market in the late 50s. Starting from 1959, Tomos began producing Citroën cars under license at the Koper factory and selling them in Yugoslavia. The automotive division was owned by the Yugoslav government and Citroën, with a 50-50 share distribution. In 1972, Tomos, Iskra and Citroën formed a new company called Tomos for the production and export of cars and automotive components.
Iskra was a manufacturer of automotive components, particularly generators.
The locally produced cars included the AMI 8, the 2 CV6, the GS and the Citroën Diane. In 1981, Tomos began producing the DAC model. The Diane chassis was used as the basis, unlike the French Acadian, which was based on the longer 2CV AK400 chassis. Using the same platform, Tomos developed a pickup model called Jerry.
Sales amounted to 2,200 DAC and 900 Jerry.
It is worth noting that Citroën prohibited Tomos from exporting these cars abroad. This event led to the termination of mutually beneficial relations. By 1985, Citroën had stopped supplying spare parts to its Yugoslav partners, thereby spelling the end of car production.
In the 1970s, Tomos began preparing to produce its own automatic mopeds to meet the new trends in the moped market.
The standard of living in Yugoslavia and in Europe as a whole increased in the 1970s compared to previous decades. The number of young buyers of motorized two-wheelers also grew. Despite the successful cooperation with Austria, at the beginning of the 70s the factory began producing its own single-speed A1 engine with an automatic clutch. And then, in 1973, the A3 engine went into mass production.
This event coincided with the factory's transition to an automatic frame welding line.
After 1973, all their vehicles were fitted with in-house engines. As early as 1976, Tomos entered the US market and maintained a successful presence there for 3 years. The market reached its peak in 1979, when fuel prices were high. All thanks to OPEC's decision and the fuel crisis. In just a few years, Americans realized that a 50 cubic centimeter moped could be much cooler than a 7-liter V8. Special versions of mopeds were even produced for young people with raised handlebars, seats with backrests, side bags and lots of chrome. Production of the Colibri line continued, and in 1977 the Mokica E90 model was released. with an increased engine capacity to 90 cubic centimeters. It's worth noting that in the early 70s, in addition to their active work in the 50 cubic centimeter segment, Tomos released its largest, most powerful, and fastest motorcycle.
Just think about it. 58 horsepower and a top speed of around 200 kilometers per hour.
This was the TN750 fastback model. In the late 60s, Tomos kind of teamed up with Norton.
This collaboration led to the creation of the Tomos Norton TN750 fastback motorcycle.
Tomos itself did not produce the engines for this motorcycle. The engine arrived in crates and the individual parts were assembled at the factory. The TN750 fastback is essentially a Norton Commando 750 model. The Yugoslavian model differed from the Norton in a few minor cosmetic details. Only 50 units were released to the market. Looking back at the successes of companies like Jawa, MZ and others in the mid-displacement motorcycle niche, Tomos never gave up trying to create his own motorcycle. A monopoly position in the Yugoslavian market seemed all the more attractive. The company began developing a motorcycle with a two-cylinder engine of 175 cubic centimeters at the end of the 70s. The power unit was developed based on the E90 engine. According to the available technical data, the engine could produce 22 horsepower and accelerate the motorcycle up to 140 kilometers per hour. However, during testing, various problems with the motorcycle's stability at speeds above 100 km per hour arose. There are even unverified rumors that one of the test riders died during test runs in Italy, and the project was later suspended. For a couple of years, Tomos 175 Twin appeared at various motorcycle and automobile exhibitions. However, the 175 Twin model was not destined to go into mass production. Two versions of the motorcycle were planned: Tomos 175 Touring and 175 Sport. It might seem that the story of Tomos is rather boring, just some mopeds and all. However, the company had a whole racing program and a lineup of high-performance 50cc bikes. Since the late 1950s, Tomos produced racing motorcycles designed for national and international races, as well as for the GP50 World Championship. This equipment was on par with Western racing motorcycles in terms of technical level. Here, for example, is the D7 model from 1962, capable of reaching speeds of up to 140 km per hour.
And on the D6 model, the Italian racer Gilberto Parlati finished on the podium at the 1970 World Championship. The production of these crazy mopeds continued until 1980.
Among the latest, we can mention the GP 75, 79 and 80 models, with the numbers in their names corresponding to the year. All these small motorcycles were in some ways more difficult to handle than motorcycles with a normal engine size, because they were very light. The weight was about 50 kilograms, and D9, for example, had an even lower weight, 39 kilograms. The engines of these machines produced about 18 horsepower at around 16,000 revolutions per minute.
In the 70s, Tomos stopped being competitive in GP, but achieved some success in national competitions and the European Championship.
At the turn of the late 70s and early 80s, the company faced restrictive environmental standards for the first time. In the 1980s, Tomos modernized its entire range of two-wheeled vehicles and focused its efforts on reducing noise and harmful emissions, as well as increasing rider comfort and keeping up with modern design. The first product of the new lineup was the APN6 model, introduced in 1981. In 1985, a new generation motorcycle, the BT50, appeared with alloy wheels and turn signals.
Based on this model, the Tomos ATX 50C for off-road was later released. In the 90s, Tomos released the Sprint, Targa and Targa LX models.
The last two were eventually replaced by the Tomos ST and Tomos LX. A new engine called the A35 was introduced. And by the way, let's not forget about the events of the early 90s. Already on December 23, 1990, a referendum was held in which 88.5% of voters supported Slovenia's independence. And we remember very well where the Tomos factory is located. The events of the gradual breakup of the state were followed by a series of armed conflicts, collectively known as the Yugoslav Wars, which lasted from 1991 to 2001. But let's not go into too much detail. For our purposes, it's enough to know that Slovenia was the first to gain independence after the breakup of the Socialist Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. The Tomos company successfully overcame the crisis and in 1998 was privatized and sold to the private Slovenian corporation Hydria. The development and production of light motorized two-wheelers continued. In 2004, Slovenia joined the European Union and a contract was signed with the German company BMW for the production of components for some of its units. In 2006, the A35 engine was replaced by the A55. This new engine featured lighter components, higher power and compliance with new environmental standards. In 2007, in addition to motorcycles, the lineup included the light supermoto models Tomos SE 125F and Tomos SM 125. In the 2010s, Tomos returned to the US market with new mopeds, an updated Sprint with classic features, and the brand new Racing TT. However, in the end, the company could not withstand the pressure from larger manufacturers and suffered losses, leading to bankruptcy. This happened in 2019. Thus ended the story of the Yugoslav and later Slovenian motorcycle manufacturing company. That's it, my friends. My story comes to an end. Thank you very much for your attention. I have many more interesting stories planned, both about the history of motorcycle manufacturing and some brief topics. But I won't spoil anything. You can support my work by being active on the channel. It only takes a minute for you, but for me it's motivation for future projects. You can also support the channel financially using the details provided. You've been watching the Krasmoto channel. See you next time!